Julia, your microphone is off. Still silent. Oh no, I've been talking to myself this whole time. That's okay. Hi, Peter. He's saying in the chat he's keeping his camera off today. But go ahead, Jules. Repeat what you were saying earlier. Still silent.
You're listening to Homo Academicus. And today's question is, one swallow does not a summer make. But can you do research? We're talking about communities, something much bigger than just networking. So go ahead and follow us on your favorite streaming platform and make sure to send this episode to that friend who you would hope that they feel less alone in their academic life.
We don't have to dig too deep to say that one of the biggest blows during the pandemic directly impacted our sense of community, right? We became more anxious and lonelier. Some even got used to the solitude. I've talked to a few professors who thought returning to in-person classes after the pandemic would be noisy and full of hugs. But it wasn't quite like that. It took a while for people to loosen up again. But beyond the effects of the pandemic, there might be also generational traits that are shaping how we organize ourselves and live our lives. A study by Consumoteca, for instance, highlights that the Gen Z in Latin America is characterized by individualism, despite being much more aware of the importance of mental health. The same study states that 52% of Gen Zs believes that they can be happy on their own, and 61% says that they don't rely on anyone else to achieve happiness. So, the question remains, how do we face the challenge before us, like mental health itself, through the lens of individualism? What kind of happiness is that can be built alone? And although we've been hearing about loneliness in the academy and individualism in research for quite some time now, how does this actually manifest in universities and how does it impact what we do? Now you'll hear from Fabiana Luco by the voice of Marcela Marcos. She is currently a professor at the Arts Department at the Federal University of Pelotas in Brazil.
É preciso concentração e foco, precisa de reserva de tempo.
It requires concentration, focus, time set aside, and a lot of sitting at your desk. But I believe that any effort to make this labor less isolating is both valid and necessary. In this sense, field work and social research play a crucial role in challenging the paradigm of isolated academic locked in their office. Throughout my career as a researcher, I sought not only to collaborate with colleagues, but also to listen to and amplify the voices of research interlocutors, whether they were voices echoing from archives or individuals present in the field. I believe it is vital to cultivate a sense of humility in the scientific field. No one creates knowledge or ideas in isolation. In addition to all those who came before us, there is also the vast knowledge present in the world that shapes and organizes societies, cultures, and the planet as a whole. It seems essential to me that we recognize we work as part of a larger community, scientific or otherwise. This is crucial even for framing questions that genuinely justify the personal and governmental investment in research. It's also too easy in isolation to focus on issues that either lack or eventually lose broader relevance.
Many people have wonderful stories about their first years in college. Maybe that's your case. The excitement of something new, a new city, or even just a different part of your hometown to explore, meeting new people. But it's not like that for everyone. Sometimes the beginning is marked by loneliness, homesickness, and a feeling of not belonging. This can feel even more intense if maintaining your mental health is already a challenge. Or, as it was in my case, you simply don't have the money to go out for a burger and connect with others.
It was rough in the beginning. Starting college was harder than I ever imagined.
You're listening to Raquel Maya.
I struggled to start conversations with new people and also felt like I was the only one who didn't fully understand what my course was really about. Like for group projects, for example, I would quietly ask the nearest person if their group had room for one more. This was how I got through my first year. Every day felt the same. Leave home, attend classes, have lunch, almost always alone, go back for more classes, have dinner, and then head home. After some time, I started having lunch with a few classmates, but I still felt like I couldn't truly connect with anyone. I kept thinking I wasn't good enough to be in university. I didn't have any friends. And living alone in a tiny apartment far from my family wasn't as exciting as I thought. I began isolating myself, so by the second semester, when my class didn't have lessons on Fridays, it's funny, I wouldn't leave my house from Thursday night until Monday afternoon. My days started to blur together and I found myself crying on the way home almost every day. Like nothing was doing felt meaningful. Excuses to skip classes or avoid talking to anyone came easily too. I really felt very useless. The turning point, I think, came after a weekend when my mom came to visit. On the day she was supposed to leave, she insisted on staying longer. She refused to go home until I booked a session with a psychology. I laughed. Me, a psychology student, needing therapy. It felt ironic, almost ridiculous, but I agreed, just to reassure her. I went to the first session, then the second, then the third, and I kept going. It wasn't an overnight change, but after a few months, I started feeling better. Slowly, I began to see things from a different perspective, I would say.
And this can even be harder in graduate school. There's a well-known 2018 study published in Nature that found that graduate students are 6 times more likely to develop anxiety or depression. The number of universities with anti-suicide protections on the windows and stairwells shows just how serious this is. It's not like we're putting up screens in a house to keep the cat from escaping, right? But we don't even find it strange to see so many safety measures in place on campus. It's something we've gotten used to it. It's become part of the scenery. Of course, mental health isn't influenced solely by loneliness or academic life. It involves countless factors and structural aspects. The environment we live in, the way we interact with the environment, and even our own bodies. Still, we want to highlight some social and relational aspects that can indeed help prevent mental health deterioration. Being part of a community, a group of people organized around us, is one way to take care of yourself, to allow yourself to be cared for, and to care for others as well. Because while loneliness, competition, and pressure are prominent challenges in academic life, the most commonly reported consequence is, undeniably, a decline in mental health. You will hear from Raquel.
I think the beginning of grad school here felt almost as lonely as starting my undergraduate studies back in Juiz de Fora. This time, though, I don't think it was because I struggled to start conversations with new people, Now the initial shock of moving to a new city, starting at a different university, and adjusting to so many changes has passed, I can see more clearly just how challenging it is to form meaningful connections in grad school. Every now and then, I recognize familiar faces in classes or hallways, but these brief encounters often feel too fleeting to create common ground or build deeper relationships. Nowadays, I do have a small group of colleagues, and I feel like I've been gradually getting closer to them. This has made such a difference to me. Having people to share both challenges and the little victories of grad school life has been incredibly important.
In a survey we conducted with undergraduate and graduate students as well as professors, we asked which of the mentioned virtues they felt they needed to develop to navigate university life better. The most mentioned virtue was courage. Meanwhile, the virtue people most believe others need to create a better environment is humility, followed by empathy. I found it really interesting that these results came up. It made me wonder why we don't often see humility or empathy as essential tools for navigating university life ourselves, instead of just expecting them from others. I have caught myself thinking this many times. Oh, if only that person were humbler here. If they were more open-minded. But what about me? Don't I also need to practice humility? Wouldn't having more openness help me deal better with the person too? On the other hand, I've also been wondering why we think we need courage more than humility or openness, for example. What does that say about our willingness to live in community? What starts with us to help build a space that will inevitably be filled with people who are very different from us? People with other experiences, other needs, and also other incredible skills that I don't have.
Knowledge inevitably has a social dimension, and sometimes it's the social interaction that puts us in situations that can help us flourish as human beings, or unfortunately leads us to struggle.
This is Ana Becerra.
One virtue that undoubtedly helps in community life is humility. Being humble involves self-awareness, having an accurate understanding of ourselves, caring about others, and being open to new ideas. Being intellectually humble also means being sensitive and having the ability to learn.
Community isn't just about having your group to grab a coffee with during breaks. It's also an essential part of the educational process that the university can offer. And this is one of the biggest challenges of distance learning. How can we incorporate this collective and communal aspect into fully online programs? We know that online education is incredibly important in our region, both for people living in remote areas and for those who work and have busy schedules, like Fabi Pereira, whom you'll hear from shortly. But how can we strengthen bonds in these courses when most of them are run by private institutions that prioritize profit over the educational process? Especially when it comes to companies that view investing in these aspects as a waste of time and money. Well, we don't have all the answers. But now you're going to hear about Fabi's experience by the voice of Marcela Marcos.
I had 2 experiences with distance learning. The first was as a tutor, and later on as an undergraduate student. As a tutor, I worked on a specialization course for teachers which tried to adopt a more individualized approach. We were supposed to take time to respond to each student, considering their individual needs. But the course didn't work out very well because we were under a lot of pressure to handle a large number of students, and we were often required to send standard responses instead. My second experience was as an undergraduate student. I decided to pursue a second degree at a time when my commute was 2 hours each way to work. So I figured I would use that time to study and get my degree. The course materials were excellent, but there was no real connection with classmates, professors, or anyone else. The university required us to work on group projects, but the bonds were very superficial. We exchanged some emails, some WhatsApp messages, and got the tests done without forming any strong connections. I also noticed that most of my classmates were in a similar situation, working, pursuing a second degree, and needing to graduate quickly. In that sense, the distance learning program helped meet those needs.
We want to encourage the idea of viewing our university experience more as we need to go together, rather than I need to be better than you. It's a mindset shift that changes the way we relate to our peers. You're about to hear Marcela sharing a story from the Peruvian Sadie Leon, whom you might remember from the first episode. We want to shed light on the issues of loneliness and lack of connection among colleagues and researchers, as highlighted in Sadie's story, but also bring forward inspiring perspectives. Listen to Carolina Magaldi by the voice of Marcela. Carolina is a professor in the literature course and its postgraduate program at the Federal University of Juiz de Fora in Brazil.
A vida acadêmica é muito solitária.
Academic life is often solitary, whether in postgraduate studies, where we tend to turn inward while writing a dissertation or thesis, or even during undergraduate studies, where a system of independent credits and courses prevents the formation of a cohesive class identity and deeper connection. This system was designed to avoid transformative integration. That's why I prioritize collaborative work across various areas. In undergraduate and postgraduate courses, where students translate short stories for books they select themselves, in postgraduate collective advising sessions, where they share readings and experiences, in research groups focusing on active research, and in both teaching and outreach projects.
Os benefícios são muitos, mas eu acho que eu
The benefits of this approach are numerous, but I would highlight three. First, it fosters collegiality and camaraderie. That supports the students whether facing the challenges of an academic career or pursuing work as translators or professors later on. Second, each student benefits from the collective research outcomes, rather than being confined to their own reading lists and isolated activities.
E uma última questão é que cria parâmetro.
And finally, there's a value of performance assessment that doesn't come from professors or supervisors. This generation of students seems to struggle more than previous ones with recognizing their own growth and accepting praise. So having peer acknowledgement as a parameter helps them to see their progress, identify weaker areas in their careers, and move forward in a more positive and constructive way. Ultimately, it is incredibly rewarding, even for myself.
Estava sendo muito produtivo para mim mesmo, inclusive.
And this isn't just a thing for humanities courses. At the Federal University of Itajubá in Brazil, which is heavily focused on technology, you can find several projects, many of which are even self-managed by the students themselves. This includes Sahibaha SAE, developing off-road vehicles, Cheetah, creating formula-style race cars, Uirá, focused on aircraft design, and preparatory courses for the Brazilian National High School exam, such as CATS and CAAI, in addition to other college companies and research groups.
Yeah, I spent a year and a half on a project named Ex Machina, and it's really, really nice to see that even to this day, I'm still in touch with the people.
Here's Gustavo Fernandes, a computer engineering student at the Federal University of Itajubá, Brazil.
It's really cool when I walk in the campus and I see a member. I feel like I never left the project at all. So the friendship is very strong. And it was even more special for me because it happened during my freshman year. So I was still adapting to the idea of being a college student. And the project really helped me because the field I study in, like the field of mathematics, engineering and science, the general idea and the idea I was carrying to the college was that they don't care about the society, they don't care about helping people, and the project's idea was really to produce technology that can improve society in a way that really helps people. So I found the project's idea perfect for me, and it really helped me to enjoy my time at the university more.
Ex Machina, the project Gustavo mentions, focuses on assistive technology for people with disabilities. During our conversation, he went on to talk about how meaningful it was to form bonds with other colleagues who were also driven by a shared desire to serve society through technology. These relationships we build can even relate to our identity, as seen in the experience of Luciana Peterson by the voice of Marcela. Luciana shared a bit about her time with Black collectives at the Federal University of Lavras and the Federal University of São João del Rei, both in Brazil.
O processo de se descobrir negra e se engajar na luta contra o racismo raramente.
The process of discovering oneself as a Black person and engaging in the fight against racism is rarely a solitary journey. That was the case for me. When I was at university, I found a collective that held discussions about race, but these conversations didn't just stay at the structural level. We also held meetings to share how these issues affected us personally.
Isso também com coletivos feministas.
I experienced this not only with Black collectives, but also with feminist and LGBTQ+ collectives that I came across during my entire time at university. It was incredibly important, both for my political engagement and my involvement in the causes I believe in. It also allowed me to connect with people who share the same values and, more importantly, who go through the same experiences I have. Finding this community during my university years was crucial. It gave me the words to describe things I thought only I noticed in the world, and it showed me that I wasn't alone.
Mas eu vi que eu não estava sozinha.
But the idea isn't simply to say, Oh, feeling lonely? Then go make some friends. We've brought up several examples tied to structural aspects of the university life, like projects and student movements that are already in place, precisely because they're designed with the purpose of bringing people together. This can be especially helpful for those who are more introverted. Even religious experiences can help. Remember Raquel's story we heard at the beginning of the episode?
Little by little, I pushed myself to build connections, until one day a classmate, who's actually a big friend of mine, invited me to a Bible study group called ABU, Aliança Bíblica Universitária in Portuguese. I was already a Christian, but the idea of exposing myself and speaking in front of about 10 people, that wasn't exactly my comfort zone. Still, I decided to go. That day, I left feeling so amazed by the warm welcome I received, the sense of freedom I experienced, and how many others in the group have faced similar changes when started college. I began attending to the study sessions, and I discovered another kind and approachable girl who had lunch at the same time as me. We started having lunch together on Thursdays, and she became my first real friend there. Over time, I realized I could open up, not just to the group, but to university as a whole. From that point on, I began forming friendships within my course, building a wonderful network, and I also started to help in ABU, joined extension and research projects. I would say I really immersed myself in everything university life had to offer. Being surrounded by such diverse people, all weekly eager to learn, motivated me to keep moving forward, inspired me to embrace everything the university provided, not only through education or research or anything else, but also through the meaningful relationships I built along the way. I learned that I could walk my own path without feeling completely alone.
Our support network plays a crucial role in both our academic journey and our mental health. And it doesn't even have to be limited to university. Part of your support network can be in your dance class, with the people from CrossFit or Jiu-Jitsu, or at the religious meeting you attend to. The important thing is not to reinforce the narrative that the only way to go through the process of research, a master's or a PhD, is by doing it alone. And in this, we can ask ourselves, am I the only one feeling lonely in this academic world? How can I try to include myself more? And how can I share my academic concerns with others? Are people from my field the only ones who have something to contribute to my research? How can we create collective spaces for discussion and conversation about authors, books, methodologies, and other topics to facilitate our understanding and that of others about key research subjects while weaving knowledge more collectively? For both the process of developing as a researcher and the process of personal growth, we need to make full use of mental openness, a crucial virtue, especially for making friends with people who are very different from us, or for dealing with a professor who brings a perspective of reality different from what we grew up hearing. I'm not saying we should always agree with everything we hear, but consider it. Walking in someone else's shoes helps us be more empathetic. Just because someone thinks differently from me doesn't mean that they're the villain. Being kind to others, especially those who are new, can transform someone's life and also your own. We emphasize the importance of bonds in university because it's there that you'll more easily find people who understand your challenges and what you're going through. Just to lighten up the mood a bit, I had a very sweet, great aunt who was very supportive of my cousin's studies. But we can't exactly say that she understood what it meant for him to go to college every night. She was more than 100 years old, so you can imagine. There was even a time when she started saying that he was going out at night and coming back late because he worked as a security guard. We know how much she loved my cousin and supported him. And you probably have someone like that in your family too, right? I also make a distinction here between being lonely and being in solitude. It's not a problem to enjoy being alone, and it's also something important for intellectual development and autonomy. But think about the process as a whole, in an integral way. It's this entire process that doesn't need to be lonely. I always remember Fabiana, who spoke at the beginning of this episode, who is also a mother, and a mother of an autistic child, telling me about the sense of community in her PhD process. Additionally, I believe that especially in the case of women, the idea of the scientist isolated in her tower of knowledge makes even less sense. Listen to what Fabiana told us by the voice of Marcela.
E o cotidiano literalmente bate a porta, né?
Everyday life literally knocks on the door. No matter how much we challenge the gender performances that are taught and socially demanded of us, there are tasks for the care of life that anyone needs to carry out to live. And these end up falling more heavily on women. And this becomes much more intense when an academic woman is also a mother. Even I, who have many privileges in this sense, such as a present partner at home, the father of my child, and a solid support network, have often found myself discouraged by the feeling of insufficiency. Not having the same time and concentration as younger colleagues without so many responsibilities.
E eu puxo esse ponto no papo sobre individualismo.
I raise this point in this conversation about individualism because, as I argued in my dissertation presentation in March 2024, if it takes a village to raise a child, it also takes a village to make a mother become a doctor. And I think the presence of women, of mothers in science, contribute greatly to showing that no one walks alone.
Nesse sentido, as epistemologias feministas, entre outras coisas...
Feminist epistemologies, among other things, prioritize first and foremost the diversity of voices present in research context. And when I say voices, I mean perspectives. That is, the location of knowledge is important. Who's speaking, from where they're speaking, to what audience they're speaking. And at the same time, where they're situated. Because this is how they are also held accountable for the knowledge they produce.
E a outra questão é justamente desconstruir...
Another point is precisely to deconstruct this idea of individuality and understand that we work as a network, as people connected to one another. I think especially in the experience of motherhood, of care, not just caring for a child, but caring for people. Experiences in which we are greatly taught, socialized, and held accountable as women.
E nisso a gente aprende que se não fizer...
And in this, we learn that if we don't do this in a shared and collective way, no one survives, because so much load is too much weight. So the idea that we can truly work in a community is beneficial because it lightens the load. And at the same time, it enriches the research experience.
Então, se nós queremos uma...
If we want greater diversity of knowledge in our fields, to produce knowledge that is relevant to people's lives and societies, we need to be willing to walk in community, abandon our individualism, and, in many cases, the competition between peers.
All of this helps us think about the multiple ways we can strengthen ourselves both individually and as a collective. Because if that's the case, when a problem arises, and I say when, because it's not even a matter of if a problem will come up, it always does, right? We will be more resilient. When we have people by our side who are seeking to live the university and research in a lighthearted way, it inspires us to adopt that perspective too. It's something that motivates us. One of the main complaints from students and researchers is competition. And what happens if we only come into contact with competitive people who work in a toxic mindset, constantly reinforcing that in our heads? It becomes difficult to be different, right? This podcast you're listening to emerges from the desire that you, the listener, can create or find a listening club to gather others to listen and discuss these issues we've been raising, sharing both the pain and the joys and solutions that you've seen around you. Together, in community. And remember, there's another way to experience the university and research in a much less, way less lonely manner. And don't forget to visit the website to get the dialogue guide with questions and other resources.
You've been listening to Homo Academicus, hosted by Alejandro Ortiz, Spanish hosting by Esteban Muñoz, script and Portuguese hosting by Débora Vieira. Script support by Robson Cruz, Ana Bezerra Felício, and Raquel Maia. Resource support by Ana Bezerra Felício, Débora Vieira, Elisa Ferres, José Almeida, and Raquel Maia. Script review by Frederico Lopes. Media outreach by Elisa Ferres and Lorena Brondani. Editing and distribution by Laura Bieber. Graphic and web design by Amanda Lopes. English translation by Tomás Friseiro. Spanish translation by Débora Vieira. The Homo Academicus podcast is a project founded by the John Templeton Foundation and does not necessarily reflect on the Foundation's opinion. Visit the website at homoacademicus.org to learn more about us and find our resources.